And let me also go live on TikTok. There we go. And here we are. Thank you very much for joining me, everyone. Welcome to the program. I'm broadcasting now simultaneously on YouTube and TikTok. The program is archived on Podomatic, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other apps as I delve into the wonderful, amazing world of electronics and learn how to do these things. We all can get our message out. We can get our thoughts out to the public, to friends, to family, to colleagues, to everyone. And in a sense, if we're crafty enough, we can actually develop our own media entity, which is what I'm trying to do here. Anyway, today I'm experimenting with live phone calls, and you can actually call into this program live. You can put comments up on TikTok for certainly, but you can call in at 617 396 4958. That number again is 617 396 4958. And I'll do my best to take the call. This will be the first time I've gotten a call, so I don't quite know how it's going to work. But if it does work, then that'll be an amazing thing. Then we can have a real live conversation, one that'll go out live on YouTube and TikTok. And then will be archived on, I think I have upwards of 10 platforms now that carry the program, and the program is doing very well. I mean, I've got I'm on the verge of getting 6,000 followers on TikTok, and I've got over 3,000 followers on YouTube. So the show is moving along for somebody who I'm not well known. I mean, I'm just a regular schlub out here in Boston. So I mean, for somebody who's just out here trying to engage in conversation, it's not a bad deal. So today is the day that is the calm before the storm. The storm being tomorrow, when the House and the Senate convene and begin the process of counting the electors, the ballots. That is when we're going to find out whether or not the you-know-what hits the fan. We are finally going to be in a condition by which this nation will at last get to hear the evidence of ballot fraud in a setting that cannot be ignored by the media, which is trying to black all of this information out. So far, the information we already know is overwhelming. It is convincing at best, at least. And it emanates out of testimony from the states that were targeted for the fraud, allegedly. And I would say they were, and that testimony has taken place conducted by state legislators, where people have stepped forward and testified to their witnessing voter fraud. And by the way, that includes both Democrats and Republicans. And the testimony has been absolutely shocking and stunning and gut-wrenching. And anyone who wants to look at it can. A lot of it is still online. YouTube actually is carrying a good piece of it. You have to dig a little bit, but you can get to it. The mainstream media will not cover this. They will not investigate voter fraud. They're ignoring it. There's a blackout. They will denigrate anyone who does discuss it. The court system refuses to hear the evidence. There have been over 50 lawsuits brought by concerned citizens who believe their votes have been suppressed by fraud. And none of that has reached the level where their evidence is presented. And we're talking about, for example, I think it was upwards of almost 10,000 voters in Pittsburgh and in Phoenix who showed up to the polls and were told that their vote had already been cast and that they can forget it. Cast by whom, right? That's the question. Those cases have not been heard by judges. There are cases in Pennsylvania and I believe one or two other states that are up for questioning in terms of the integrity of their elections, where Republicans were issued different kinds of ballots than Democrats. The Republican ballots had barcodes on them, they had a structure on them that would make them more difficult, if not impossible, for the machines to read them, in which case they would then be spit out and hand counted by who? We don't know who. We don't even know if they still exist. You have all of the usual sort of charges of vote fraud by people on the rolls who are either passed away or who no longer live in the states. That was extensive, for example, according to the testimony of elected officials in Nevada and in Georgia. And in fact, in Georgia, you have a federal judge, that being Leslie Abrams Gardner, the sister of Stacey Abrams, who has thrown out the cases brought by two counties, which is seeking to take off their voter rolls people who no longer live in the state, people who are no longer alive. Very, very suspicious conflict of interest there, because Stacey Abrams is heading up the effort to register people, and she's already been embroiled in a scandal that involves registering people from out of state. So, you've got judges who are ideological and who are refusing to hear the evidence. As I mentioned, and it's worth re-mentioning, so far of the upwards of over 50 cases that have been brought, including to the Supreme Court, only one has reached the point of the level, only one has reached a judge who has heard the evidence, and that was in Wisconsin. Hey, how are you? Thank you to somebody sending me a note. Um, and in that case, the judge did say that the evidence of fraud was there. We're talking about 125,000 votes that were committed unlawfully in Wisconsin. Votes that were cast by unconfirmed voters. We don't know who cast them. And by the way, that can be easily confirmed, and they haven't been confirmed. But this judge decided that he didn't want the case to go forward. He didn't want to hear the evidence because he was concerned that by doing so, he could affect the outcome of the election in Wisconsin, and he could overturn what has been accepted as the results. I'm getting okay. This to me is quite shocking because, after all, don't we expect our judiciary to be independent of political considerations? They shouldn't be looking at whether or not anything is going to affect results. Their job is to, uphold the law, is to respond to evidence, not decide whether or not they want to. As I've said, this is like, let's say you have a case, a murder trial going on, and the evidence is presented, and the jury is ready to convict someone of murder, and the judge steps in and says, look, I know there's evidence of murder here, but I'm going to throw this case out because I like this guy. I don't want to hurt his future because he's popular. Maybe it's a rock star. I don't know. Maybe it's O.J. Simpson. Who knows? But the point is, I don't want to take this case because it doesn't feel good to me. You talk about abuse of power, talk about corruption. Anyway, so that happened in Wisconsin. Getting back to the point I'm making here, there has been no public airing of the evidence in the context of a courtroom. So finally, and that includes the Supreme Court, they're very, very questionable in terms of their actions of refusing to hear these cases. Lynn Wood, the attorney from Georgia, who has a lot of good information, I'm not endorsing everything he says, but he is sending out tweets which indicate that Chief Justice Roberts is corrupt, is compromised, is being blackmailed, and that he should step down. I'm not going to get into that evidence and what that is, but I think that you can, a basic Google search. Look at Lynn Wood's Twitter account to get that. And if this is untrue, well then let's investigate. Let's have a lawsuit. So far, there's been no response. The point is that they have refused to hear cases that should be heard. They're cases brought to them that are absolutely within the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Voter fraud, ballot fraud, election fraud. Linwood is putting his life in danger. Yeah, he is. Look, he said people should kill Pence. Well, that's disgusting, and I reject that. I hope he didn't say that. I mean, I don't know if he did, and if he did, then he should be disavowed. We'll let's leave that one there. I didn't see evidence that he said that. So, getting back to the subject at hand, and by the way, I'm reading my TikTok comments here for YouTube followers. And by the way, call in 617 396 4958, 617 396 4958. So finally, tomorrow, we will have an airing of the evidence of ballot fraud. And that airing is going to take place on the floor of the United States Capitol. That's where it should take place. And the reason it's taking place is because we now have 12 U.S. senators and a delegation of, I think, upwards of 140 U.S. House members who are going to challenge the elections in 6 states, maybe 7 states. 7 states, including New Mexico, where Biden apparently won, have gotten involved in their legislators appointing alternative delegates. Those are, Trump delegates, a Republican slate, to challenge the Biden delegates. That is entirely in the constitutional purview of state legislators. The Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, says that state legislators shall regulate election policy in their respective states. That is what the Constitution says. They haven't always done this, but they have the right to do it, and they are starting to seize that prerogative now, finally. At least some of them are. They all should, including the liberal ones. The state legislators get to do that because we elect them. That's our representatives. You don't have these things done by judges or governors or bureaucrats. I mean, the founding fathers understood that the best venue to do this is the legislature, because in the legislature, you have a forum of elected people from across the state who have to do it in the open and have to do it in accord with their state constitutions. These laws were violated by governors, particularly in Pennsylvania, where the governors and the judges backing the governors basically were making up laws as they went. They were creating new laws as they went, and all to favor Biden. That's beside the point. They had no authority to do any of it. And in the state of Pennsylvania, it's particularly egregious because apparently they created laws after the election. No state legislation will change. Well, that's up to the state legislatures. They have the right to either change or not change, or create or not create election laws. The courts don't have that right under the Constitution, Article 2, Section 2. So it is that grounds by which these senators and these representatives tomorrow jointly are going to challenge the results of those states. Now, Dr. Jerome Corsi, who's been a guest on my program here, Dr. Steve Turley, who has been a guest on my program here, and they're both excellent sources. They say that what will happen, and also Bill Still from the Still Report. I haven't had him on as a guest, but he's a great source. I mean, he's an investigative reporter who's been around since the 1960s. He's in Washington. He's got a lot of connections in intelligence, Good guy. Check out his Still report on YouTube. McConnell and Pence are traitors and should be murdered. Oh, don't say those things on my show. Nobody needs to be in any way harmed. That's illegal and that's wrong. If someone is involved with illegal activity, we have a system by which charges can be brought and they can be tested in a courtroom. In fact, that's what we're asking for with the voter fraud. So let's pipe down here. Let's not make those kinds of charges. Not on my show, not on any show. So getting back, the fact is that tomorrow these senators and these house members are going to challenge the legitimacy of those states based upon the fact that they had changed laws without the approval of their state legislatures, and that the evidence of voter fraud is extensive and massive in those states. I think it's both of those issues. Now, Vice President Pence, acting in the capacity as the president of the Senate, will be given the plenary authority, the absolute authority, to count the electors. And that means that he can choose to not count the electors. He doesn't have to open the envelopes. Or he can dismiss the electors. We don't know what Vice President Pence is going to do. We do know that he has had a lot of time meeting with President Trump these past couple of days. We also know that he has come out with a statement on Monday indicating that he supports the efforts of these senators and House members to challenge those states. And we know that in the past, he has delivered speeches saying that every legitimate vote has to be counted and every illegitimate vote has to be tossed out. Now, the big test is going to be tomorrow in terms of whether or not he means it, whether or not he's telling the truth, whether or not he's a man of integrity, whether or not he is the good Christian that he's always claimed to be. We don't know what's going to happen. He's the wild card. But what my commentators expect, and that being, oh, I think we're getting a call. Hello, you're on the air. How are you?
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the whole sort of Zionism, anti-Zionism, religious anti-Zionism, that kind of thing.
Okay. What about Zionism?
So I'm a Zionist myself, and I've been heavily influenced by your writings.
Thank you.
From you wrote those classic articles as Chuck Morse.
Thank you.
It's really good. But as I heard a little bit of your discussion with that guy David about
Sure.
Zionism, I think that the situation in the case, because I am familiar with the situation of like religious Zionism, religious non-Zionism, anti-Zionism. I've got sort of some rabbis in the family, Orthodox rabbis, and so on. So I'm not familiar with that. Yes, you asked him. I think what was the main argument that religious anti-Zionists use. Then,
well, they seem to be claiming that there's something in the Torah, in the Talmud, in the writing, which does not permit the Jewish people to settle in Zion and create a sovereign state. Now, I challenge them to show me exactly where that is, because while I am not a rabbi by any means, and I'm not a scholar, frankly, nevertheless, I mean, I think that any Hebrew school student knows that the entire Torah, all the way from the days of Abraham right up till the Second Temple period and right up till today, one of the pillars of the understanding of Judaism is that we are to take possession of that tiny little swath of land, that inscrutable little turf that exists between the Jordan River and the Great Sea, which is the Mediterranean Sea. Now, why God commands us to do this, we don't know. That's a mystery. But if you read the Torah, you see it. It's throughout the Torah. And I don't understand why these guys who are, anti-Zionist, how it is that they can go and read the Torah portion on Shabbos and on weekdays which say, talk about, the land, the promised land, and not see this. I just don't get it.
Yes.
And I
So,
challenge them to step forward. They're welcome on my program anytime to
okay. So,
talk about this.
yeah, I'll tell you a little bit about what their argument is.
Okay.
So, they think that because we're in exile, that we're sort of in a state of their main source is Tractate Ketuvot in the bottom of page 110A and the beginning of page 111B.
Mm-hmm.
And that section talks about what are known as the so-called three oaths, and it's this idea that Solomon, around the time, it's difficult to put a time on it, but the basic idea is one of them is you're not allowed to. Jewish people aren't allowed to rise up against the nations, and you're not allowed to go to Israel in masses. That's the main thing that they point to. But the argument back is from the religious Zionist perspective is, first of all, we weren't going against the nations. It was done. You had the United Nations, which is the closest thing pretty much to a world government, did have a resolution in 1947 for State of Israel, and the majority voted for it. And regarding this idea of an oath not to, the other thing is regarding this idea of an oath not to rise up against the nations and so on. And the idea is that the argument back is that it's a two-way thing. So if the Jewish people are persecuted to such a heavy extent, then we don't have to then keep the oath not to then rise up. If they're rising up against us, we're allowed to rise up against them. Not that they were rising up anyway, because it is, every other nation, other nations were given a state, and the Arabs already had loads of states, and we were just asking for one state. It's not like a big demand, and it was voted for, and there's more legal basis for Israel than there was for most other countries.
Well, from a historic standpoint, I don't see how you can make the case. I'm not saying you're making it, but how they could make the case that Israel achieving sovereignty is going up against any of the nations, because after all, first of all, the Jewish people have always lived in Israel and did so, and the settlement started to increase in the mid-19th century. That's not new. I think that after World War I, when Turkey was defeated by the Allies, the region fell under the control of the British Mandate, and the British Mandate issued the Balfour Declaration, which was recognized by King Faisal of Syria in the Faisal-Weizmann Accords, that basically recognized Israel as a modest state within modest borders that protected the rights of the Palestinian minority, non-Jewish minority, and protected Islamic religious sites, something that Israel has done. Maybe not perfectly, but for the most part, in a pretty good way. So there's no going up against the nations. Israel is basically just simply asserting its sovereign rights as a free, organic society, and that, if anything, it's the nations that have gone up against the state of Israel.
Well, what they would say is, of course, first of all, I would, and you might agree with me actually, I would differ with you on the use of the word Palestinian, because at the time, of course,
Palestinian was Jewish.
You know that very well.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's put that aside.
That's right.
They would say, I think that indeed, okay, perhaps the Jewish people weren't going against the international community, when it came to wanting the establishment of the State of Israel, because of course the international community agreed. But they would say that there were the Arabs of that area, or the Arabic speakers of that area. I won't use the term Palestinians, and I won't even use the term Arabs necessarily, because Arab nationalism took a while to develop, and they weren't necessarily considered as Arabs or people in the Levant at the time. But anyhow, those Arabic speakers, they weren't asked, so it was all just sort of, you had King Faisal, who was not an Arab of that area, or
he certainly was. I mean, Faisal was recognized in his day as the leading Islamic authority. He is considered the direct descendant of the Prophet Muhammad. He was recognized as first king of Syria and then king of Iraq. And he signed the Faisal-Weizmann Accords on February of 1919, which recognized Israel. And that followed a letter that he sent to Chaim Weizmann, who at the time was the dean of Harvard Law School, and it was a very well-known international, was a Zionist, where he said that he welcomed his brother Jewish people back to their homeland with a hearty welcome, he said, and that the
Oh yeah,
only
sure. I mean,
the only consideration that he put into that was, again, that the non-Jewish Palestinian minority had to be protected, and that the Islamic holy sites had to be protected. And as I said, that's been done. I think that Faisal was motivated not just by religious sentiment. And by the way, there is a lot of information in the Quran which recognizes Israel as a
yes,
Jewish state, but also on a practical level, he wanted the post-World War I Arab world to emerge as independent, technologically advancing democracies. I mean, countries that would be able to function in a free context and compete on the world stage. And he felt that a Jewish state would help them do that, that this was a natural alliance between the Jewish state of Palestine and the Arab
yes.
states that was supposed to emerge after World War One.
Yeah, so say for example, and I agree with that, but let's say for example that so King Faisal was the I can't remember exactly what is the king of, but you're saying it's Greater Syria and Iraq, or Syria
Exactly.
of that time, which was Greater Syria.
That's right.
But the state of Israel, or not the state of Israel, because state of Israel didn't exist at the time, but the modern state didn't exist at the time, but the nascent state of Israel, so the state of Israel that's to be, just in case listeners don't know the word nascent, but that state was the Faisal wasn't from that particular part, so Israel would be sort of South Syria in that sense, from that point
Right.
of view.
Well, Israel was South Syria in the Ottoman Empire. There wasn't even a Palestine.
It was in Syria, but Faisal wasn't. They didn't have a particular leader of South Syria. There was no leader of South Syria because, of course, there was no so-called Palestinian leader at the time because it was never a state.
Faisal was recognized as the leader of South Syria. Absolutely true. Anyway, listen, I really appreciate the call. I want to get back to the talk of the election tomorrow.
There's one other thing I'd like to mention.
Okay.
So the book that David mentioned, that would not really be representative of the mainstream Orthodox non-Zionist position at all. The author of that book, as you mentioned, the author was Yaakov Shapiro, who's the spokesman for Statma, which is extreme anti-Zionism. The main Orthodox position, the Haredi position, is a position of non-Zionism, which is still quite pro-Israel. It's more like a technicality that they don't really believe in any other ism other than Judaism. They do probably look at the three others, but a little bit as well. But they, it's not as extreme. That book that he mentioned, the author, my main point is it's far more extreme version of anti-Zionism. But yes, that's my main thing I want to mention as well.
Listen, I really appreciate you calling. You're the first call I've gotten.
I also want to mention one other book you might be interested in. It's called Ein Habenim Samecha by Rabbi Tal.
Okay, send me a note about it. Maybe I could have these people on. Listen, thanks so much.
Okay, thank you.
Charles Moscowitz at gmail.com. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
All
Bye.
right. Thank you. All right, you're welcome to join the program here, 617-396-4958. I want to get back to talking about the election, if you don't mind. We can talk about Zionism certainly anytime, but let's. Right now, we're trying to stop an ongoing coup d'état against our election. That's, to me, everything else, can wait. I mean, this is the subject at hand here. You're welcome to join me. I'd prefer that being the topic at hand. The number is 617-396-4958, 617-396-4958. So getting back to the issues at hand here. Tomorrow, there will be an airing of the accusations of voter fraud. Apparently, Vice President Pence, acting as president of the Senate, will begin alphabetically to call out each state and read off their delegates. And the first state that's contested is Arizona, because it's the first one in the alphabet. And that's going to be a whopper because Arizona has huge fraud. They've got the, you know, the pens replaced by Sharpies, you know, which allowed them to put ballots, ballots couldn't be read by the machines, and then they'd have to be hand counted by whom? We don't know. You've got people showing up in Phoenix to vote and finding out that their vote had already been cast. You have all the classic elements of fraud in Maricopa County, which constitutes about 60% of the state of Arizona. And you've got now election of state representatives, I understand, issuing subpoenas to investigate, to accept testimony from the election officials and to audit the Dominion voting machines, and that is being blocked, which is illegal. I mean, if you and I blocked a subpoena and refused to respond, we could go to jail for that. Now, I'm not saying anyone should go to jail, but I'm saying that that does not look great for tomorrow when Vice President Pence calls out the state of Arizona. It doesn't look like it's legal for them. So the result will be that once Vice President Pence calls for Arizona, there will be a challenge by at least one, if not 140 House members, and at least one, if not 12 senators, maybe more. And when that happens, that triggers a debate. Then it goes into a full House session that could last up to 2 hours. Now, according to Bill Still from the Still Report, who again has a lot of inside information, he says that it will be at that point that the Trump campaign team, I don't know who will be there, maybe Donald Trump himself may be there. They are going to step in with experts and make the presentation that there had been voter fraud in Arizona, including the evidence around the Dominion voting machines, and that this evidence is going to be so powerful and so utterly convincing and so shocking, and it will have to be covered by the media because it's going to be in public in the floor of the US House, that the result is going to be so extreme that Vice President Pence is going to call for a recess, and in order to give Joe Biden and the Democrats the opportunity to concede the election. Now, maybe that's wishful thinking. I don't know. But that's according to Bill Still. He feels that Biden is going to concede, that, in fact, another piece of evidence that he presents is the fact that they've canceled the inaugural parade and they've stopped building the scaffolding for the U.S. Capitol, which is usually put in place for the inauguration, and that they're basically, showing signs that they are preparing to concede. There is also, of course, the business of the creeping scandals around the Biden family, including Biden's son, Hunter Biden. There are now charges being brought by Ukrainian authorities. There are indictments. This is really something that is moving in on that family. And that the understanding is that as part of Biden's concession, which will be done, they'll figure out how to do it and save face. There will be an understanding that he will not and his family will not be prosecuted, nor should they be, in my opinion. Let's see, what else do we have coming here? I can't wait till Joe Biden is our president. Oh, good. Well, you might have to, you may have to wait for a long time. I don't know. You might have to wait forever in that one. We'll see. Biden doesn't need a big, huge inauguration. I would say he doesn't need any inauguration. Look, I mean, a very close person in my life, let's put it that way, a very liberal person, contacted me this morning and said that she's concerned that President Trump is engaging in a coup d'etat. Now that tells me that this is, going to be the party line for tomorrow. And my response is, no, he's trying to stop a coup d'etat. But would not the Biden people want to at least have an investigation to find out if there was fraud? I mean, after all, if there was no fraud, then the Biden presidency will be able to emerge from out under a cloud. Then we'll know that Biden was fairly elected, fair and square, and I'll accept that. If there is a full investigation and we finally have an airing of the evidence, and it turns out that there was no fraud or no significant fraud, not enough to overturn an election, then I'll accept that. I don't like it, but I'll accept it, and I will go into the loyal opposition. And in that capacity, I will criticize a Biden administration or praise it based upon its activities. But the problem is that they want to block that from happening. You have um, an attorney general, for example, in Michigan, who's actually said that she wants to prosecute lawyers who are trying to bring cases on this. You have a secretary of state in Michigan who tried to block the release of information regarding the Antrim County forensic audit of the Dominion voting machines. Why did Vice President elect get re sworn in the Senate? I think that the vice president elect was sworn in as a U.S. senator, apparently, which says a lot. That's more evidence that this ain't a done deal. That if you have Senator Kamala Harris being sworn in as a senator from California, it shows that she hasn't resigned, which means that she's hedging her bets. She maybe doesn't, she's not so sure. Um, and also, I mean, talk about fake news. You had the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, name a replacement for Kamala Harris when she hasn't resigned, kind of all pretending like this was going forward. That isn't what happened. She didn't resign yet. So, we'll have to see what happens on that one. We are trying, but you don't want to listen. You're welcome to send comments on TikTok where we're live. We're also live here on YouTube. You're welcome to call in and comment on any issues you'd like to share. 617 396 4958. 617 396 4958. I'm going live every day now at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time from my base here in Boston, both on TikTok and on YouTube. I will also be interviewing guests later in the day as I move forward. But my goal right now this year is to conduct a live program with phone call-ins. And apparently I now know that I can do that. I just did it. It was wonderful. It's amazing. I mean, this is like, back when I was a radio talk show host. I mean, we can get live phone calls, and I'm very excited about that. Again, the phone number is 617 396 4958. 617 396 4958. Do you realize pushing crazy conspiracy pushes unstable, radicalized Trump supports over the edge? I'm not pushing any crazy conspiracy theories. I mean, I'm simply saying that we need to have an honest rendering of the vote. Is it a crazy conspiracy theory to point out that, for example, elected officials in Pennsylvania have now stated on the record, and you can look this up, that in the state of Pennsylvania, there were 200,000 more votes cast than there are registered voters? That's not a theory. That's being presented by elected officials. Now, maybe they're wrong, but I doubt it. Why would they do this? The Dominion software issues. There are a lot of experts who know something about data and computers who are coming forward and testifying about how that machine has hacked, how first of all the machines went live, which is illegal, and secondly how they were rigged in such a way that they favored Biden. That's not a theory. Those are legitimate experts who are analyzing this. It's called data experts. So no, I'm not pushing any theories. If you say that these are theories, well, fine. Why don't you join me then in supporting a national forensic audit of the Dominion voting machines? Why don't you support my efforts to get these states to finally have a genuine, objective investigation of these charges? Do you know that there's 85%, according to many polls, of Republicans believe the election's been stolen? 30% of Democrats believe the election's been stolen? I mean, are we all conspiracy theorists? Is that what this is? I think that in order to clarify the issue, there needs to be an investigation. So all I can say is if you're going to sit there and charge me or anyone else with engaging in conspiracy theories, then fine, join us in a call for this investigation. Now, my understanding, by the way, speaking of which, is that a proposal that has been floated, a sort of a trial balloon, is that tomorrow Vice President Pence is going to call for the establishment immediately of a commission that will investigate these charges. Now, this has been done historically in the Hayes-Tilden race of 1870, where Republican Rutherford B. Hayes his election was contested by Democrat Samuel Tilden of New York. That around the same time, I think it was in January. Let's not forget the lame duck period back then was a little longer. I think it went till March. Now it only goes till about 2 weeks from now. That in response to the controversies around that election, the Congress set up such a committee, and it included, I think, 6 senators, 6 representatives, and 6 members of the Supreme Court, all, both parties. And the commission sat for 10 days. They investigated the charges of voter fraud, and I think they determined that the rightful winner in that question was Rutherford B. Hayes, and he was sworn in as president. Now, the same approach could be taken now. I just hope they don't put John Roberts on that committee. But putting that, all right, we're all going to be on our knees praying for mercy. Did any Trump supporter on here listen to Trump's #1 phone call to Georgia? I didn't hear. I mean, if you're talking about the call to the Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, I think that Trump was calling for the Secretary of State to get to the bottom of voter fraud in that state. That the Secretary of State is covering it up. Now, what happened is that he should never have spoken to that Secretary of State because that guy's obviously an enemy. Because what he did with that 30-minute phone call was he turned the transcript over, or someone, he's denying he did it, someone in his office turned the transcript, taped the call, and turned the transcript over to the Washington Post, which then extracted like a 2-minute segment soundbite and ran that up the flagpole saying, you see, Trump was pressuring him to cheat, which is a complete and total lie. This is as bad a lie as this is a hoax. It's just like the Charlottesville hoax where they said Trump supports white supremacists. Completely false. Or the charge that he mocked consciously mocked a disabled person. Completely false. I mean, these things are just, this is an attempt at a political hit. And if that's all they have against Trump, then that's a pretty weak hand. That's maybe they're going to try to pull something else out of the hat and manufacture another thing. I don't know, but if that's all they got, then they can forget it. That's my thoughts on that call, and I hope he does call all of them. It is a hoax, yes, indeed. Trump literally told him he was committed to a federal offense and could go to jail. If that Secretary of State is covering up voter fraud, he very well could be facing charges. His behavior in this regard is very strange. I mean, I don't know, again, it was a private conversation. Trump has a right to do that. This is like the perfect phone call with the Ukrainian president asking him to investigate Biden corruption in Ukraine, which we now know happened, and there's huge evidence. Trump did nothing wrong. He was simply saying, look, start to fly right here. Investigate your state's voter fraud and get with it, or else maybe you're involved in a cover up. Trump knew it was recorded, skillfully got them to admit lies. I hope so. I think that may be true. I mean, I think at this point, Trump knows that every time he goes to the bathroom, it's recorded. Everything is recorded, and he's surrounded by enemies, people who are deep staters who are trying to do him in. I mean, that even happened, I think, with his meeting in the White House about a week ago with Sidney Powell and Lieutenant General Michael Flynn and that CEO of Overstock, the former CEO Lynch, where you had several of his lawyers apparently yelling at him and demanding, that, and he was he appointed Sidney Powell as a special prosecutor. They denied her access to the White House. They denied her security clearance so she couldn't speak with her client. I'm interested in what you do in your life. You seem to have a lot of time to do serious thinking. Well, I mean, first of all, that's none of your business. Secondly, I I have a job. I'm not going to get into my private life. I work. My work has been a portion of my usual work has been curtailed by the pandemic because I have family members who are vulnerable to that, and so I have to kind of prescribe my activities. But I'm continuing to work remotely, and I continue to write. I wrote a book that I'd published about 3 weeks ago, a month ago now, called God is God. God is the creator and lawgiver. That's available at Amazon.com. I'm not here to say this so I can sell books, although, hey, if you want to check it out, it's available at Amazon.com, as are my other books. I've written over 15 nonfiction books. In fact, now that I've written that book, I'm writing a sequel which deals with Satan. And that's a little more slow going, but so I do writing, I do blogging, I do videoing, I do work as an author, as a writer, as a blogger for people. And one thing I used to do before the pandemic that I'm not doing now that I love and I want to get back to is Uber and Lyft. I love Uber and I had such a great time. I mean, I just got out there and met people and had great conversations. It was great fun, but I can't do that now. So that's what I'm doing. And I do read a lot. Anyway, so tomorrow is pivotal. There's a lot of rumors around the outpouring of support for this coming clean is one of the most interesting and exciting things politically that I have seen in my long lifetime. The our people are going into Washington. I've seen videos of them, the TikToks and all, and it's very heartening. I mean, people are really standing up. That's what's going to do this. The establishment is against us, even the Republican establishment. We have to apply pressure on our elected officials to get to the bottom of this question of voter fraud, including Democrats. I mean, look, I'm in Massachusetts. I'm contacting, Elizabeth Warren's office, right? Ed Markey's office. Do I expect them to do anything? No. Although Elizabeth Warren, even though she's very two-faced and really has no basic principles, it was only a year or maybe year and a half ago that she she called for an investigation of the Dominion software. She's not doing it now. But I'd remind her and I asked them put aside politics and do the right thing. Voter fraud is a concern for all Americans. And if President Trump's team makes a presentation tomorrow, like they promised they will, and President Trump has said that they're going to do this, that convincingly shows voter fraud, then I think that's going to turn this thing around because I think when the American people see that, they won't be able to unsee it. And that most Americans liberal Democrats, Republicans, conservatives, they don't want to see a stolen election. You know, you have your hardcore left wingers who either don't care or they actively support this because they want power. But I don't believe, and I'm not going to believe, that that describes most Americans. I think that might describe maybe 15%, maybe. So maybe I'm putting too much faith in my fellow American citizens, but I believe that the American people, when they see this, they're not going to accept the fraud. They're going to accept the fact that this happened and they're going to act accordingly. I have to believe that. But whether or not you or I believe it, it's all going to come out tomorrow. Now, Dr. Corsi, who will probably be on my program later this week, he doesn't think it's going to end tomorrow. He thinks it's going to drag on maybe right up till election, right up till the inauguration day. I hope he's not right about that. I hope it does end this week. But if it doesn't, and if the reason it doesn't is because the evidence is being covered up, then I don't think people are going to give up. I'm not going to give up. I will continue to agitate for an investigation and for the presentation of the truth. I don't even want to think about that, though. That's too depressing. I believe that it will happen. Um, do you say the vote was fraud? Yes, I do. I think that there's overwhelming evidence that the vote was tampered with. It was tampered with electronically. It was tampered with by corrupt uh, poll workers who apparently might have received money from Zuckerberg to the tune of $400 million that he earmarked for these corrupt uh, precincts. I think they stuffed the ballot box. I mean, there are cases, for example, in Philadelphia now that where Biden got like 99% of the vote. That's not possible. You know, I think that it was coordinated. It was concertized between the states in question, and that it was a conscious and witting and deliberate attempt to steal the election. Now, I don't think that they thought it was going to be as difficult as it is because they weren't expecting Trump to get such a big vote. Trump won overwhelmingly, and Trump won in all these states. In Pennsylvania, he had upwards of 700,000 votes. Now, all of a sudden, he's losing. No, it's very suspicious. And I don't think it's going to stand because I think that there's enough people in this country who want the truth. At least I still hope so. I mean, I guess that I might be wrong about that. Anyway, you're welcome to join the program. 617 396 4958. What is on your mind this afternoon? You're welcome to come on down. 617 396 4958. What's going on in Georgia today? I mean, there's a special election. I am concerned about that. I hope that the Republicans win, but my main concern again is the president. Okay, no hate, but I think is something is fishy about Democrats. I miss it. Linwood just released a video with proof of fraud in Twitter. Good. Look, Linwood, I mean, the guy's obviously kind of a loose cannon on the deck, so to speak. And I don't like talk about anyone being assassinated. I completely reject that. And if he's saying that, then that's crap. But he's saying some other things which apparently are on the money in terms of excuse me, just trying to fix my connections here. In terms of the fraud going on. So yeah, if you want to look at Linwood, maybe I should do it right now. You can go to his Twitter account apparently, where he's got stuff there. Let's just see Linwood Twitter. All right. Um, he's got a bunch of things here. Light always comes overcomes darkness, truth always overcomes lies, but that doeth truth cometh to the light, that his deeds may be made manifest, that they are wrought in God. John 3:21. Good. Well, that's what we need right now. Note to Chief Justice John Roberts. I'm not sure I should read this. Many are interested in docket entry numbers 41, 46, 57, 58, and 60 in case number 15545. As head of the highest court obligated to rule on election fraud cases, would inform public of content of these entries and then resign, or vice versa. That's a pretty heavy charge. I wonder what those cases are. You can check it out. Yeah, he does have information we don't have. He's got some information. Some he's mentioning some rather unsavory things, which I'm not going to get into, about Barack Obama and his family. I'm not going to go there, but this isn't the time for that. Let's talk about the election. That's for later. A sobering but well-reasoned analysis of the current situation facing our president, our country, and our future as a free people. And then he has a link to an article here, which let's see. No, I'm not. It's not coming up for me. Okay. Anyway, you can check it out for yourself. It's Linwood's Twitter account. Does he have a video of fraud? Well, I mean, we all have seen one video of fraud, and that was coming out of Fulton County, Georgia, where you saw that the woman with the blonde braids asked after everybody left, being alone there, being videoed by webcams from the state, to State Farm Arena, pulling a black box out from under the table, pulling ballots out of that box and putting them into the voting machine over and over again. I mean, to me, that's a smoking gun. I mean, that's like Monica Lewinsky's blue dress. That's like Richard Nixon's 13 seconds of tape gap, which led to his resignation. I mean, those things are evidence. That's hardcore videoed evidence. I don't know why that hasn't led. I mean, this is what President Trump is annoyed about with that Secretary of State. He's ignoring all of this, right? Um, look, Biden technically is ahead in Georgia by only, I think, 11,000 votes. There were experts that said that Fulton County precinct she could have stuffed over 40,000 votes in that ballot, in that box. I mean, the corruption is it stinks. I mean, it's huge. I live next to Fulton County. You never see any Biden signs. Exactly. I mean, Biden, what did he like won 95% in Fulton County? That's not possible. I mean, that's obvious fraud. I mean, first of all, it was a very close election in every county in that state. Now, maybe Biden won a few counties for sure, but if he did, it was maybe by a fraction. It was like 50 but to 48 or 52 to 47, maybe. But to win 99% or 95% of the vote in that county, and I think it was two counties, Fulton and Gwinnett, that's obvious fraud. Obvious fraud. And for this Secretary of State, I mean, there's something wrong with him. What is wrong with that guy, this Raffensperger? I mean, really, it's outrageous. All right, overwhelming professional evidence. Pay attention. There are Biden signs only where I am in Buckhead. Yeah, Buckhead is the very wealthiest neighborhood of Atlanta, apparently. It's where Elton John lives. Machines are down right now. I don't know. People in Georgia, what's going on in the street? Call in. I mean, we're all concerned about Georgia, especially with this runoff. And I mean, are they still using the Dominion voting machines? I know that during that testimony, I think it was last week, you had a computer expert, this guy Jovan Pulitzer, who was there to monitor the Dominion machines. He actually broke into the meeting with special breaking news, and that is that he had evidence that those machines had been hacked, that they were online. What the hell is going on there? You're welcome to join me, 617-396-5867. 4958. 617 396 4958. News of Dominion machines not working. They said they would count them. Yeah, oh, great. Fulton County is corrupt. Look, I think that some of these inner city counties have been corrupt for decades. It has never been challenged because you never had a man like Donald Trump who's stepping in and isn't taking it. I mean, in 2012, I think that the election between Barack Obama and Mitt Romney, you had precincts in Philadelphia, some of the same cities, Philadelphia, Detroit. I don't know about Atlanta back then, but I think St. Louis back then, that had voted for Obama like by 95, 99%, maybe in some cases 110%. But Romney didn't have the spine to do anything about it. He didn't challenge it. Donald Trump is another breed. He does, and that's this, by the way, just as a sidebar, I think this is why Romney is so bitter. I am for Biden, so the ballots weren't legal, yet the judges let it slide. Yeah, that's what happened apparently in Wisconsin, according to Steve Bannon, who talked about this on his excellent program, the War Room, the Pandemic War Room. And according to Joe DeGenova, who was his guest, who's a great lawyer and who's on the Trump team, that the judge in Wisconsin let it slide. He saw the evidence and he said, I'm not going to rule on it because I'm afraid that it may adversely affect the outcome of the election. And I don't want to do that. That's unconscionable. That's corrupt. Their job is to uphold the law, to look at evidence, not to decide they don't like the outcome of something. The outcome is not relevant to them. I think he should be taken off the bench, in my opinion. Things about Soros owning machines. There are connections with George Soros and Dominion Software and Smartmatic, which is their partner. I think that one of the leading executives in that Smartmatic was just named the head of Soros's company. So yes, George Soros has his fingerprints, I think, all over this. And why has no one been arrested yet? There already have been some arrests. I think that there are 3 or 4 cases nationally where people have been arrested, low level people who have engaged in voter fraud. That's not being covered by the blackout media. You have to look for that, but do some research. The bigger people involved, it's hard enough to just overcome this conspiracy. I think if and when, God willing, we overcome this, then we'll talk about investigating and finding the people who engage in this crime, because voter fraud is a crime. It is a felony. Do you think this will go beyond tomorrow? Well, I don't know. I mean, Jerome Corsi says it will. He says it's going to go right up through till inauguration day. The if all 7 states are get challenges, then that could drag out until Friday at least, because each state gets a 2-hour debate period and there's other things they have to do. So, we are talking about Friday for the full testimony. I think that it depends upon how convincing and how damning the testimony is. If it really comes down to very, very convincing testimony, then it'll be over. But I wouldn't be surprised if the thing doesn't get dragged out right up to inauguration. 617-396-4958. What is on your mind this afternoon? You're welcome to join the program. Call in. I can take calls. I now have done it. So I have the ability, and I'd like to hear from you. 617-396-4958. You're welcome to join me. Maybe I should give away a free book. I have extra copies of my book, The Nazi Connection to Islamic Terrorism. I guess if you call in and you then email me your address, I'll send you a copy. Or how's that? Why not? 617-396-4958. Call in. The next caller gets a free copy of my book, The Nazi Connection to Islamic Terrorism. I'll sign it for you. So you'll have a free signed copy published by WorldNet Daily. It was back, it's a bit older. I mean, the book was published, I think, in 2010, but I have good new copies here. They sent me them. And if you want to have a copy, if you want to call in, then do so and then send me an email with your address. Again, 617 396 4958. Does anyone have any news emanating out of Georgia? The special election today. Do we have any news emanating out of Washington, D.C., with the arrival of people who are going to participate in tomorrow's rally? Be careful. There are rumors, and my source on this is Bill Still, the Still Report, that Antifa is going to infiltrate that rally dressed in MAGA gear with MAGA hats, and they're going to try to cause trouble. They're going to try to engage in violence, and they're going to try to discredit the rally goers. So let's be careful. If you're going, be respectful, be well behaved, put out a good image, and just speak your mind when you can, and do so with the very honesty that we have. We don't need to lie like them. Antifa being brought in by truckloads to DC. Look, I mean, didn't they just arrest the head of the Proud Boys for burning a BLM flag? Whatever happened to these are people who support burning the American flag. That's not a crime. He was arrested. He was stopped at the airport, according to Gavin McInnes, and arrested. I mean, this is what kind of country is this? That, I mean, whatever happened to free speech? I mean, this is going to be someone is being detained. This is really a very scary time. Heard Antifa will wear hat backwards. Good. Well, then we'll know who they are. Just be careful. Stay away from them. Also, you can see the spirit inside is different. Yes, you can. You can tell. It's just how they carry themselves. Just be careful out there. Don't go near them. Let's focus on what we're. Yeah, do not Uber. Well, I mean, I don't know about that. Be careful with Uber. Don't talk politics. Um, Anyhow, I think I'm going to wrap things up for now. Remember the truck drivers who blew the whistle on driving ballots from New York into Pennsylvania? Yes. I don't know what's happened to them. I'd like to get them on this show. Yes, they did. They drove pristine ballots that had all been made out to Biden and Biden only from Nassau County in New York to York, Pennsylvania, the day before the election, where they were dropped off and received. The truck drivers, there were two of them, and they were both interviewed by Hannity. They were they checked out what was on those ballots, and they found those ballots. Oh, there's a lot of that going around. There's so much fraud. I just think that if President Trump and his team tomorrow only present what we already know, then that will be enough. But I think they might have a few more aces up the sleeve. Let's hope. Let's hope they knock this friggin' thing out of the park. How do you block on TikTok? I don't know. I'm just learning TikTok. I don't block anybody, by the way. I that's not my style. Everyone's welcome to my TikTok. I mean, I guess unless you're so abusive, I haven't had that happen yet. Um, so I mean, I don't know enough about TikTok to comment, but I know that it's a pretty amazing site, and I'd ask you to subscribe. I've already got almost 6,000 subscribers on TikTok, and also please go to my YouTube channel and click subscribe. The more YouTube subscriptions I can get, the more I can grow this program. I am doing the live program Monday through Friday, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, for at least 1 hour, maybe longer, where I will be taking calls. The phone number is 617 396 4958. 617 396 4958. I already know I can do this because I got one today. You're welcome aboard. And of course, my books are available at Amazon Books. Just put my name in the server, Charles Moscowitz, and you will see them come up. Anyway, on that note, I want to thank everyone for joining me this afternoon. This is Charles Moscowitz. Let's be careful and let's pray for this country. Let's pray for America. Let's pray for the safety of our beloved president, Donald John Trump. And I shall return, God willing, tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time.